Good afternoon. Welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, August 21st, 2024. My name is Drew Clark, and welcome to Chicago. I'm here in the neighborhood of Pilsen, which is roughly halfway between the United Center, where the action takes place at the Democratic National Convention in the evening, and the McCormick Place, which is where most of the action is going on right now. And I'll actually be heading over there after this webcast. Today, I had hoped we'd be talking with a panel of experts on green energy and the Democrats, but sometimes you just don't. You strike out, okay? And we reached out to many people and had a number of people who would like to come back and participate in another time. But we don't have any guests today, so it's just going to be me talking a little bit about the topic that we advertised, green energy and the Democrats, as well as a variety of other issues from the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago. We're 2 days in, we're roughly halfway in, and 2 more days, the rest of today and Thursday before the end of the convention. And I do have a couple of thoughts I want to share about it. And, given this little more informal format, we may be able to take, we always take questions, but we may be able to take them sooner. And depending on the audience engagement, we could perhaps even promote people up and they could address our topic. So let me just back up a little bit. For those of you who may be new to Broadband Breakfast Live Online, we're a weekly program focused on better broadband, better lives. That's our motto here at Broadband Breakfast. We report. We try to be very down the line. We're not partisan by any degree. We had reporters at the Republican National Convention last month and reporters here at the Democratic National Convention. And in our coverage of broadband technology and internet policy, we also tackle topics that may slightly diverge from the core of broadband infrastructure and broadband's impact. And they include things like energy, utilities, issues of big tech, AI, crypto. In fact, at the Republican National Convention, we did a live online event, and we spoke with people who weren't there at the Republican National Convention, but our reporter on the ground talked quite a bit about crypto, and crypto ended up being a real major point at the Republican National Convention. I've actually been a little bit surprised that there's been a little less discussion of climate-related issues and green energy than I would have expected. Now, granted, there is over at the McCormick Center in about 2 hours a discussion on that. I plan to head over there and listen to that, so may be able to provide updates in a future report or a future event on that. But I'll come back to our topic of green energy in just a moment. So we cover issues around internet technology and policy, and we see politics and the political processes really quite central to the topic areas, particularly given the priority that the federal government has put on infrastructure spending through the Broadband Equity Access Deployment Program, through the now lapsed Affordable Connectivity Program, and many other programs of the federal government, including those that preceded the current president, Joe Biden. Reconnect is a great example of a rural broadband program that is administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and continues and is certainly going to continue. And again, I don't mean to suggest, in fact, broadband has really, fortunately, been outside the realm of partisan politics. It's just issues on the periphery, like cryptocurrencies at the RNC last month and green energy. I had hoped here at the Democratic National Convention that do point to a stark difference between the two parties, platforms, and the way they approach these issues. Just a little bit of personal notes about what it's like being here in Chicago. I mentioned at the top that I'm at my Airbnb, which is in Pilsen, which is about 3 miles from the United Center, about 2 miles from McCormick Place. So roughly halfway between the two. Unlike other conventions, including previous conventions I've covered in the past, you know, it's more like the city. The city is a roving convention because, you know, with the geographic distance, you kind of rely on some form of transportation, buses or Ubers or by foot even, to get from venue to venue. And so, you know, right now the crowd's over at the McCormick Center, or they were at the hotels where delegates were caucusing in their states or in special interest groups. There's a whole array of discussions. I think it's called Dempalooza, right? And there's actually some interesting tech-related developments. Yesterday, I attended a session on vote and I guess you'd probably call it voter file information and how candidates make use of technology. And look for a story coming up in Broadband Breakfast today or tomorrow about that panel and the progress that, again, the Democratic Party was touting at this convention. Perhaps there was a similar discussion at the RNC. I don't know. What we do know is that at these conventions, there's both the on stage, okay, so what's at the United Center later on, and last night, and I'll tell a little bit about that in just now, and then the sort of, I don't know, behind the scenes is not really the right word, but all of the other activities that go on, because every public official wants to be at their national convention, right? They're the, you know, and there's lots of layers to politics in the United States, right? We obviously think about federal and the federal level, but there's lots of layers beneath that, the state level, county level, the city level. Another piece we just had in Broadband Breakfast was city mayors, Democratic city mayors, speaking about broadband connectivity and affordable broadband connectivity. And that's I think the lead story right now on Broadband Breakfast. Won't be soon because we're always updating with new stories and new news. So that's kind of a little bit of the lay of the land. And as I had said a little before, energy and the green energy or green advanced energy. These are all kind of maybe loosely defined terms, but they relate to whether our economic product as a nation is delivered through the use of fossil fuels, or whether it's through wind, solar, water, and other forms of energy. And sort of two that sort of maybe sort of are a little more controversial, right, is natural gas and nuclear power, right? And those are kind of test cases, right? Are you pro advanced energy? Are you pro green energy? One of the things that we at Broadband Breakfast have done is we've looked at some of these issues a little bit kind of off our core, is the connections they have, right? How the internet and the broadband infrastructure is connected to and supports smart grid, right? Why and this is a piece, this was in the exclusive report that we just published a few weeks ago. I'm going to drop the link here in the chat session. And again, feel free to use I see some are using the Q&A, I just haven't seen what it is yet. Some are using the Q&A. I will take as many questions as time allows, and we may or may not go the full hour, but don't plan to cut it short if there are questions. So this report I just put out there, this is an exclusive report. It's available for our Broadband Breakfast Club members, and we hope you'll subscribe and join. And as a part of the Broadband Breakfast community, we hope you'll take advantage of our special offer to join the Broadband Breakfast Club at no more than $490 a year, or just under $50 a month, to be part of the Broadband Breakfast Club. In it, you get exclusive reports, data and reports that we've begun to produce, and of course, unlimited access to Broadband Breakfast. On Broadband Breakfast, you can access at least 7 news stories a month as a free member of the Broadband Breakfast community. Log in. It's easy. There's no passwords on our system, and with that, you can access up to 7 stories a month. But we hope you're reading more than that, and we hope that you will upgrade. and join the Broadband Breakfast Club. So this report, and I'm actually going to share my screen so you can see the report. I'm logged in, so you can see the full article right here. So this exclusive report on green energy and the Democrats we produced a little bit earlier this month, and it highlighted this report highlighted EPB, originally the Electric Power Board in Chattanooga, and this became still talked about quite a bit, but 10 years ago it was extremely well known and marketed themselves quite successfully as one of the first gigabit cities. Well, the whole reason for EPB's creation, the fiber optic network in the city, was to enable Chattanooga to get on the smart grid. This development of advanced energy, in my mind, showcased the strong connections between an advanced energy economy and the importance of broadband. Now, I'm not an expert on this topic, and so I don't want to pretend to be. I had hoped we'd have a whole panel. We didn't. We didn't get them, but we'll get them. We'll get them in the future. And I would ask them questions about the reality, because I come from an economics background. That was my minor in college. I always want to know the costs and the benefits. To me, it's important that we not lapse into hyperbole. One of the things that just always teed me off is the way a lot of advocates of green energy talk about it like saving the world. And sure, there's a component of that too, but you have to get down to the brass tacks, the economic costs. And the key question, or one key question in this space, is externalities, right? The externalities of pollution and how you internalize those externalities. There's a lot of thought and effort have gone into this by people in other fields, and so carbon pricing, carbon taxing are proposals in this realm. But the key point I'm trying to get at is that we have to have a cost-benefit analysis, an economic-minded approach to energy, and on that score alone, I think that the evidence is beginning to show that there's a need as a country, as a world, to move from the fossil fuels to the wind, solar, nuclear, natural gas, geothermal, all of these methods of energy production. And so, in the reporting we've done, dipping our toe into this topic, we've definitely highlighted this. And in this exclusive report, we highlighted how the Republican Party platform is really 180 degrees from the Democratic Party. It's a full-on embrace of fossil fuels, drill baby drill, I think is the language, and it's hard not to see green energy as a kind of political wedge issue between the political parties. The exclusive report that I'm showing here on the screen, just highlights the how conservationism originally was a Republican Party issue with Theodore Roosevelt, but over the last 50 or so, or maybe 60 years, it's become much more associated with the Democratic Party. The exclusive report goes through a lot of the history in this area, highlights how energy consumption in the United States is and continues to remain predominantly reliant on fossil fuels, but we are definitely seeing more and more energy that is green or advanced. And again, this is where the debate comes, right? Okay, well, at what cost? How do we shift from one technology to another? But what is clear is that the Inflation Reduction Act, the 2022 bill that the Biden-Harris administration passed, has in some ways changed a lot of the dynamics in a similar way with broadband. It's not about the federal funds alone, or even really the federal funds. It's about the unlocking of private capital together with federal funds. In broadband, of course, we haven't really even seen BEAD funds out, which is turned as a kind of another interesting criticism that's being made, is how long it has taken BEAD funds to get out the door. We just saw Louisiana on Monday unveiled their process for the check Broadband Breakfast for the details. I've been a little busy here in Chicago, but the states that are putting their portals out there to get funds distributed for broadband deployment, that process has not stopped private sector investment in broadband, and we've seen a lot of that. And I think this is kind of a parallel over with the energy space that through the Inflation Reduction Act and the forefront of that bill is promotion through tax credits, 370 billion investment in clean energy over the next decade. That's part of it. I'm going to actually just a little hard to see everything on my screen here, so I'm just going to move around a little bit and see. So this is again the exclusive report on green energy and the Democrats, and this referring to another previous exclusive report we did specifically on smart grid components. And I wanted to just highlight one more quick item, which is to say the Democratic Party platform released just 3 days ago, Sunday. There's a story on Monday in Broadband Breakfast about the platform, right? And the article highlights, and this is available for everyone on Broadband Breakfast, this article, it's focusing on broadband infrastructure, CHIPS Act, green energy, and other tech issues in the Democratic Party platform. Again, just released on Sunday. And even though it was just released on Sunday, it was done in July. And so many times the platform actually, refers to Joe Biden's second term, right? It was clearly done in advance of his stepping down as a candidate, and Kamala Harris is stepping up as the nominee now of the Democratic Party. And of course, this convention being the 4 days in which the Democratic Party tries to build momentum for their candidate and vice presidential candidate for the White House. So in this article highlighting the 92-page platform, the article dealt with broadband and the key emphasis on broadband. It's very, very stark. And then I just want to, this is kind of where I wanted to go, is to highlight, this is from the platform on the way the Democratic Party is tying together infrastructure investments with semiconductor promotion through the CHIPS and Science Act and green energy through the Inflation Reduction Act. And the platform notes that the president's Investing in America agenda has incentivized $877 billion in private funding across the United States thus far. Companies are investing hundreds of billions more. It is saying, the party is claiming, than under Trump, to build new factories. And then it highlights, chip factories, tech hubs in a variety of cities, all of which happen to be swing states. And the party notes, we've made sure that lower income counties see a larger share of investments. And then just scrolling down a little bit more, this is framed in the context of advancing science, investing, research, and keeping a focus on these investments that are critical, the high-speed internet, advanced energy, and bringing some of that chip making capacity back to the United States. There's no question that the United States is no longer the chip making center of the universe, but it is in the sights. Now, it's not the only tech issue out there, right? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And in the Republican Party platform, we saw a lot of discussion about two technologies, namely cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence, and the argument that the Republicans made in their much shorter platform of 16 pages was that the Biden administration has taken a overly aggressive, overly regulatory approach to both of these, particularly on cryptocurrency. And it's undeniable the Biden administration has really cracked down in many ways on blockchain-related technologies. We talked all about that at our Broadband Breakfast Live online during the Republican National Convention. Go back and watch it and see the discussion that our experts had. AI, little kind of closer case, a little harder to say, and the Democratic Party does not really have a kind of a ringing statement one way or the other on AI, just sort of more cautious promotion of AI, but without lots of substance. Let's just put it that way. So that's kind of an overview of the core items I wanted to speak to. I wanted to talk about the role of the party, the Democratic Party, as opposed to the Republican Party, in promoting advanced energy, right? And again, it may be that those in the energy space don't want to say that one party is so much more in favor of their agenda than the other, but it's just undeniably true that the Democrats at this moment are promoting green energy in a way that Republicans are not. Now, again, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, we're not trying to say that. Let's go ahead and see what question we've got here. We do have a question, and I'm going to, again, open it up to any who would like to ask questions. If you have a strong feeling on this topic, I guess, as they say in C-SPAN, Republican voters dial one line and Democratic voters dial another. No, seriously, we'll take anyone who wants to ask a question. And our first questioner is Dan Smith. Dan, thanks for being a regular on these programs. Dan's proposal is to run new power lines for green energy, run fiber for first and middle mile. You're using a term that is kind of a little loaded, first mile instead of last mile. I mean, this is kind of the point. And I should say, this is another point. I won't open my screen again, but let me just drop a link into a very interesting event that we hosted here at Broadband Breakfast just over a year ago. And, I do think this was in some ways on the cutting edge of policy discussion. Our discussion at the Made in America Summit in June of 2023 was literally all about the connections between these three issues, namely broadband internet infrastructure, green energy, advanced energy, and semiconductors being made in America. So, I mean, we called it the Made in America Summit. We certainly had discussions of that topic, but if you look at the agenda, which you can if you follow the links on that page, we spoke about the BEAD decision allocations had just been announced the day prior, so we actually added in a quick panel with state broadband offices. But the goal of the sessions were to relate the smart grid to the broadband infrastructure. We had a panel discussing domestic manufacturing and the chips race. We had a discussion on Buy America rules, which were then very controversial, have gotten less controversial in part because of actions by a number of companies in scaling up Made in America capacity. And then we closed it with a panel on creating an American green energy industry. And that panel, which again, not my area of expertise, but I've become intrigued by it, spoke at really great length at the way in which this market has emerged, right? That the Inflation Reduction Act has spurred private investment in clean energy, and by doing so, we're hopefully making progress from the point of view of environmentalists on potentially curbing the effects of climate change. Now here, I'm immediately beyond my area of expertise. I don't really want to say this does that or that does this. I just don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert on this topic, but I do as I guess as a citizen, as a voter, I am concerned by efforts to kind of go all in on fossil fuels. There's just like it took a while for us to see the damaging impacts of smoking in the public health context. After some decades, we certainly, adapted. Now smoking is very much kind of on the outs. It's not prohibited, right? But basically we're getting to that point with fossil fuels and the environmental consequence extraction of oil. Now, I'm not saying you can do away with it, but it's definitely something that we're seeing more efforts to kind of make these clean energies work. Do we have any other questions? Let me go to our Q&A tab, and we do. So Jay Schaeffler asks, your thoughts on this administration before the election opening up the NTIA BEAD funding beyond such a strong focus on fiber and licensed fixed wireless only. Will UFWA, unlicensed, I'm guessing, fixed wireless, get enhanced funding before November 5th? Thanks for your question. Great. Obviously not on clean energy. That's fine. Yeah, I think we've been seeing signs. It's been gradual, but it's noticeable, or I should say, it's clear movement from the fiber only position that the administration essentially took 2 years ago to a grudging recognition that we're going to need to use fixed wireless and possibly even LEO satellite services to reach the administration's goals of the BEAD program. Why do I say that? Well, I'm still kind of a stater of the fact that when you can use fiber, you should use fiber. But there's enough wireless people who argue contention ratios and things of this sort with me that say symmetrical speeds are not necessary, right? And as long as you have good upload and good download speeds, you have what you need. And I should also add that it's also really clear that there's no network anywhere that's all wireless or all fiber, right? I mean, like, here I am, I'm talking to you, I'm using Bluetooth, I'm using Wi-Fi, I'm connected to an internet service in my Airbnb. I know not what it is. I don't know if it's cable or more likely cable than fiber, but I don't know what internet service. I guess I could do some tests and figure out, and I might. But the point I'm getting at is there's every network, every communication has got some degree of wireless and some degree of wireline. And as that hybrid network approach is really clear, I guess there's a little less pressure on saying, fiber everywhere. Now, as to your specific question about the administration before the election opening up the BEAD and the NTIA BEAD funding, I mean, there is guidance that the administrator, Alan Davidson, has said is coming. I think he said it specifically in regard to satellite, or I think it was alternative, whatever the term is, alternative deployment methods. So I think it is quite likely that the administration will issue further guidance on this. As to advanced funding, I don't think there's any there's enhanced funding anywhere. I mean, the funding is what the funding is under BEAD or under other programs. It's just a question of whether there's new rules or new requirements, or I should say, new rules that give less requirements in terms of the way states allocate decisions. Keep the questions coming. I'll talk here as long as we have questions. MS asked a question, Drew, where do I rank transportation, electrification, and decarbonization on my list of aspects of green energy and the Democrats? MS asked because they aren't specifically mentioned, and to me, as a voter, citizen, and my work domains, they are major focus of U.S. life and the Democratic green energy policy and politics. Thanks. All right, so let me just make sure I'm understanding your question. And the question is asking me to rank transportation, electrification, and decarbonization. And again, this is again cutting against the limits of my knowledge. I mean, I did, in a previous life, I was an editorial writer and for the Deseret News in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we did opine and weigh in on things like I think it was called Tier 3 gas, right? And Utah has, where I was living at the time, has a really interesting environmental problem. It's kind of like it's a bowl. The mountains on both sides of the valley make it into a bowl. And there's this thing that happens there called the inversion. Okay. And it's particularly bad in January and mid to late January for like 2 weeks. And it also sometimes happens in the summer around this time, but less so. And this inversion is just extremely dangerous for health. It's kind of like the way I've read Los Angeles being in the 70s and early 80s before a lot more environmental restrictions led by the state of California, right, came to be. And getting to better, or I should say less polluting gases, fuels, is a key element of doing this. And you know, there are other key elements like stove burning. I had no idea wood stove burning was bad until I moved to Utah, and I basically learned, yeah, it's a huge contributor to particulate matter in an environment like that, in a inversion type environment. So I guess this is a bit of a detour on the way to answering your question, MS. But look, there's certainly emissions from transportation, from gas, which is why, again, and electrification, cars. I mean, this is why there's so much energy, to use a pun, around electric vehicles these days, right? I mean, it's no longer kind of a crazy, wonky green thing to do. It's more like I want a fast car. I want to, that's a remarkable transformation of the past 10, 15 years is the way transportation has moved towards these advanced methods. Now, as to the question about, ranking them, they seem to me to be a little incomparable goods. That is to say, I mean, decarbonization is really just a product. It's a means to the end, right? The end being, let's get the energy we need in a way that doesn't contribute as much to either human health, in the case of the inversion, or climate change, as is argued in the case of emissions of fossil fuels. I guess to answer your question, I think that the economy is the way we balance priorities, right? As some wise politicians said, I mean, an administration's budget is reflective of its priorities, and so you look to the budgets where money is being spent. You look to money as the way that we reconcile different values. And that comes back to my point about internalizing externalities being key to getting to where the economy can start to play a role in helping make decisions about where people spend their energy dollars. Do I choose to spend money on an electric car? Do I choose to make choices? A lot of these are by businesses, right? How businesses spend their resources, and this is why we're also seeing a lot of attention by a variety of businesses around their green energy usage, right? And you're seeing businesses talk about, hey, we're carbon neutral, or whatever that means exactly. And I should say one more quick thing about the environment and energy and broadband. The other exclusive report we published just this week, I think on Sunday we published it, is about data centers and the environment. Okay. And so that's another issue in which tech, or I should say telecom, and energy are super, super intertwined. And data centers, of course, are a key component of our internet infrastructure. They're a place in which data is received and transmitted, and they again, now we're getting to some other great telecom geeky stuff, but data centers are huge consumers of electricity and of water, and we're going to see more and more of that. And our exclusive report highlighted the kind of increasing NIMBYism around data centers, and it hasn't been kind of particularly poked at yet as to whether they're good or they're bad, but it's definitely part of the mix of energy and telecom. All right, more questions keep coming in. All right, let's see what they are here. Let's preference the people who put their name on them, but again, you can ask them anonymously. Thank you for all of your questions. Jack Belcher asks, back to green energy. USA Today reported the fluctuation in EV used car resales make buying used EVs almost a non-starter. The main car makers like GM are reducing their production. Is this significantly and want to be done to reverse this trend? Is the absence of charge infrastructure something else? And what are the Democrats on this today? Well, good question, Jack. Thanks for your question. And look, I'm, as much as I've been accused in the last couple of weeks of being, pro environment, pro Democrat. I mean, look, I'm a skeptic. I'm a skeptic of advanced energy, probably more so than the average person. But the more I read on it, the less skeptical I become. And to your point, Jack, I think that's a great point, right? I mean, there are a lot of uncertainties around about moving full scale to electric vehicles. My brother owns a Tesla, and as he's traveled from one part of the East Coast to another repeatedly, I observed his trips were taking 50% longer than my trips because he had to stop all those times to charge, right? And people kind of recognize this. Tesla, the maker of this car, has obviously done a very incredible job of building out their infrastructure to enable cross-country trips, to stop at superchargers. The superchargers are amazingly fast, right? I mean, they basically charge you at 350 miles per hour. Use kind of interesting use of miles per hour, but the miles you charge in the hour that you're sitting there. So look, the point I'm getting at is there are a lot of unanswered questions about the electric charging infrastructure, and you're raising a new one about the resale market of electric vehicles. I am inclined to agree with what you're saying. I don't know more about it. Now, as to where the Democrats are, I mean, the Democrats are very much pro advanced energy, very much kind of concerned about climate change in a way that the Republicans simply aren't. And so I can expect there will be a lot more on this. But as to the points you're making, I do think that we're not out of the woods on moving to electric vehicles. Let's just put it that way. All right. So I'm going to keep going through these questions. Thanks for raising them. Like I said, I'm happy to take your questions. Not offended if you don't want to stay the whole hour, but thanks for being here. And I'll tease you with, I'm going to come back to talking about my experience seeing Barack Obama 20 years ago at the political convention and my experience last night. So that's your value for staying to the end if you want to do that. Let's keep going through the questions here. Ron Suarez, he asks, Alyssa Slotkin is the Democratic Senate candidate here in Michigan. Should and how would she support community internet versus incumbent ISPs who have neglected rural areas that tend to vote Republican in Michigan? I want to be, let's just say, I don't think yet that municipal broadband is a Democratic or Republican issue. Some people are trying hard to make it seem like it is, right? And there are certainly those kind of talking points about government-owned infrastructure. And I've tried to skewer this many times. I'm happy to do the quick version right now. Look, any broadband infrastructure involves putting fiber on rights of way. Someone is in control of those rights of way. Normally it's a city or some other agency of government. And so my argument is that government is inherently involved in any telecommunications infrastructure, wired or for that matter, wireless, with the siting of wireless facilities. And so when you have that involvement, the question really is, okay, is that the only appropriate role for government to approve a permit for a private company? There are many, many, many cities that own electric infrastructure. There are many, many cities that, and probably all, own water infrastructure. I mean, there's some private infrastructure, but the question really is like, well, how far down that line do you go, right? I mean, should a city partner with an open access provider to operate the network? Should a city partner with private companies to operate networks And clearly they do. They can and they should do. So municipal broadband is not, in my view, a quote Republican or Democratic issue. As to the issue of the party support. I mean, I'll keep an ear out for that, Ron. Maybe we'll get a story on that here in Broadband Breakfast, not long from now. By the way, I'm just kind of dismissing these instead of answering them like I normally do, just so I can keep my eyes out for all these questions. Doesn't mean I haven't answered them. I've tried to answer them. Communities could be municipal broadband or cooperative. Yes, excellent point, Ron. Thank you. And a third or another question from Ron up north in Michigan, Traverse City Light and Power. Yes, we've had people from that entity on our Broadband Breakfast Live online. They pride themselves on being responsive in community-powered utility and broadband. Absolutely, amen to that. An anonymous attendee asks, there has been a lot of work done on USF reform. What do I think its chance for passage at the end of this year or 2025? I actually do think USF reform is going to happen next year, right? Strangely. Not going to happen this year, election year, nothing ever happens. Although, I mean, that's a bit of a blanket statement. Things have happened in election years. And like, I would not actually dismiss the possibility that privacy legislation could pass. Unlikely, but it's possible that privacy legislation could pass because it's basically become, defanged. It's not a partisan, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue, the way, immigration is a Democrat-Republican issue. Obviously, climate change is a Democrat issue, so it's not going to pass. But USF reform is going to happen next year because of the intransigence of certain Republicans in bringing the Affordable Connectivity Program to a vote. It would have passed, will pass if it were brought to the floor, but it was not brought to the floor in the House. And because of that, because the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, has expired, the only other option that's really out there is an advanced, updated universal service fund. Okay, and we talked a little bit about this in our program 3 weeks ago, I believe it was. We'll come back to this. We'll keep coming to this issue. Thanks for asking your question, anonymous attendee. MS, you're welcome on the question, and thank you for teeing up our second report, the data centers and the environment. So again, please join the Broadband Breakfast Club. We rely on the support of our sponsors, but also each of you, and so we'll hope that that you will join. You will take advantage of our offer that we've been sending out via emails to join the Broadband Breakfast Club at a discounted rate. I see another question. Let's just make sure I'm tackling as many questions as possible here. Remember to put them in the Q&A tab. It's just a little bit easier to look at one place. But we do have, I see this is just a link to other people to go to on the Universal Service Fund. So I don't see any other questions. So I'm going to close with my story about political conventions, right? And this is my first political convention in 20 years. I attended both the Democratic and the Republican convention in 2004. That was the year John Kerry ran as the Democratic nominee and George W. Bush as the Republican. The Democratic convention was first in Boston, and the Republican convention was the next month in New York City. And again, in hindsight, you see trends, right? I mean, Bloomberg, the now Democrat, well, he was a Republican mayor at that time, and he was there, as was Rudy Giuliani, who was a respected figure at the time, and of course, George W. Bush, the nominee. So it obviously leaned heavily on the 9/1, 9/11 kind of reflections. It was only 3 years at that time since the terrorist attacks of 9/11. And I remember I did a lot of stories. I was working for National Journal's Technology Daily. And so I actually wrote about technology related topics. One story I did was about the RF frequency in convention hall, and I interviewed someone who was, designing and making sure as much as possible there was Wi-Fi signals. Now, I don't remember at the time whether I mean, I know I had Wi-Fi by 2004, 20 years ago. I don't remember whether I used it in the convention hall, but I will tell you they have not improved in 20 years because the Wi-Fi was terrible last night, right? And this is one reason why certain companies sell very high-priced lines that are landline at the convention. But as I, kind of harkening back to the start of this call, conventions are a lot more than just what happens in this case, United Center, in prime time, which is, of course, a lot of speeches, party officials, the official roll calls, approvals of the platforms. It's also all of the discussions that take place in other forums at hotels and parties and gatherings and the like. But one of the things that, many people speak about is the electrifying speech that he was not even a senator. That was senatorial candidate Barack Obama gave in 2004 in Boston. And I was there. I heard it. In the recollection of the past, it's assumed even greater proportions, right? I mean, it was a good speech, no question about it. And it's discussion of red America versus red states versus blue states. There are no red states, there are no blue states. There's just the United States of America. That was a line from his speech 20 years ago. And some have commented that that's, in some ways a very dated view. We are so polarized on so many issues as a nation that you can't really give a speech like that. And in fact, last night, former President Barack Obama did give a speech like that. He made nods to the previous speech without directly saying, "Hey, I'm referencing my former speech," but he talked about bowling, little leagues. Sorry, not bowling. I was talking about little leagues, right? And how there are still little leagues. And I mean, the messaging and the message last night was less about, hey, let's all be united. It was more about let's get past the partisanship that is so poisonous, to use a word. I don't think that was used, but I'm saying it. The partisanship that's so poisonous for relationships among citizens, right? And how what he did hearken to was Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address, in which he talked about the better angels of our nature and how we need to move to that politics where we're not constantly demonizing the other side for the stances that they're taking, whether we agree or disagree with them. And I do see some other choices and statements in the chat. Thanks for spending this 48 minutes with us and for sticking with us. Next week, we're going to be talking about our upcoming digital infrastructure investment event, that in-person event that's taking place in Washington on September 19th. And I will go ahead and preview the next two events that we're having. We're also going to be talking about kids and social media on September 4th. And then on September 11th, we're going to be talking about data centers and the environment. And I'll preview one more on the 18th of September, the day before our in-person event. We're going to be talking about measuring broadband. What is the next step? Thank you, everyone, for being with us, for spending this time with us. We will see you next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. Take care. Bye-bye.